अरे महादेव एंड वेलकम बैक टू द चैनल। यस, ये चैनल एग्जिस्ट करता है बट देन ये आपकी फीड पे नहीं आ पा रहा था क्योंकि मैं वीडियोस नहीं डाल पा रहा था। एनीवेज, वी आर बैक एंड हमारे रिजरेक्शन के बाद द फर्स्ट गेस्ट ऑन माई पॉडकास्ट शो हैपेंस टू बी नन अदर दैन श्रेयस शर्मा। नाउ आप में से बहुत लोग श्रेयस शर्मा को ऑलरेडी जानते होंगे अगर आप मेरे सोशल मीडिया के थ्रू मुझसे कनेक्टेड हैं। एंड अगर आप श्रेयस के ऑडियंस हैं तो भी आप मुझे जानते होंगे क्योंकि हमने काफ़ी सारे एपिसोड साथ में करे हैं। But then, for those of you all who do not know who Shreyash Sharma is, in a very short nutshell, he is a content creator for sure. And he is also working on a research with the City University of Hong Kong. And he also writes blogs related to foreign affairs, geopolitics, etc., with various think tanks and local newspapers of Bharat. But let's cut the intro and सीधा हम पहुंचते हैं एपिसोड पे क्योंकि दिस एपिसोड वाज सुपर सुपर फन। वेल, मोस्ट ऑफ द एपिसोड्स विद श्रेयस शर्मा आर फन, बट इसमें हमने काफ़ी सारी अपनी पेंटअप चीज़ें निकाली हैं रिलेटेड टू प्री इंडिपेंडेंस हिस्ट्री। फिर हमने जियो पॉलिटिक्स की बात करी, फिर हमने श्रेयस के ब्लॉग्स के बारे में बात करी, फिर हमने बहुत कुछ बात करी है। तो मैं ज़्यादा आपका टाइम नहीं खाऊंगा, बस एक छोटा सा इंट्रो एंड श्रेयस शर्मा ऑन पॉडकास्ट विद SN in 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Happy Reading and Exploring. Welcome back to podcast with SN Shreyash Sharma. कैसे हो आप? And how's life?
Yeah, I'm good. Final year, up to just left with one more semester to graduate. So yeah, feeling
Okay.
mixed up emotions, but yeah, I'm happy.
So how's Hong Kong treating you? क्योंकि यहाँ पे तो ठंड भी है और सांस लेने में भी थोड़ी दिक्कत हो रही है।
Hong Kong is pretty good. Actually, Hong Kong, I like Hong Kong more during winters because quite surprisingly, during winters, weather here is exceptionally clear. So you have a lot of sunny days. So last December, I was I spent Christmas and New Year here in Hong Kong only. So it was a lot of sun. So yeah, and then that thandi ki pyari pyari hawa. So yeah, feels good to sit under the sun in winters over here. And during summers, it's mostly overcast weather, just like London. So I don't like Hong Kong much in
Oh,
summers, but in winters, it's good. I like it.
winters are a bit of struggle here in Delhi, but ठीक है, we'll manage.
Abhi, you are in Delhi,
So
right? So how is
हाँ,
Delhi treating you? I think this is a question that must be asked. You're living in
Delhi is giving me a hard
Pakistan.
time to breathe, but then I'll have to manage with it.
Yeah, everybody is managing. Even the most important people in the country are managing. So
Subliminal shots. I see what you're doing there. All right. So when we had started planning for this podcast, तब अलग scenes चल रहे थे, अलग controversies चल रही थी, और अब we are in a different plane. So where do we start off from? What we've actually planned is to talk about pre-independence history, but if I know both of us well enough, we'll probably diverge off into what's going on currently in the world. So do
yeah,
you want to start off with history or do you want to start off with something else which you wish? Like,
let's go with history because that was your initial
sure,
idea. Then in between we can digress to
sounds good.
take on tangents, whatever is relevant.
Sure. तो बस बेसिक से स्टार्ट करते हैं कि कैसे आपका एक्सपोजर कैसा था? What was your stream in 11th and 12th? It wasn't humanities for sure.
No, I took humanities with mathematics. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I took
अच्छा, आप इको ऑनर्स कर रहे थे? I thought maybe you were commerce or science student.
no.
Never
I
knew
was
कि
in
आप
commerce.
humanities के हो.
So there's a very interesting story. Like while I was in 10th, so coming from very conventional middle class families, हमारे यहाँ पे it was a taboo to go for anything except sciences. And but then I was at that time, I was like, okay, maybe because I never wanted to do anything in science. इतना तो मैं clear था. But then, this is really stupid thing. Most of us are like, oh, we want to be IS officers and all, without even knowing what an IS officer does, right? So tab tak, that was the thing. But then, so that was my inclination to go into humanities. And my family used to taunt me like anything. Not my immediate family, but then my extended family. So I took humanities with mathematics actually. So my parents were like, study whatever you want, but then don't leave mathematics. That much was their condition to go for humanities. So I was like, okay, I'll take mathematics. I hated it to the core, but I'm still studying it. That's the irony. Even now with economics, I'm studying like core maths, Lagrangian and derivation and everything. So yeah, and so my extended family were like, so I used to take coachings in 11, 12 for mathematics. So my family would, which is very normal, right? So my family would taunt me, the extended family, that oh, he's taking humanities, right? So coaching किस चीज की करता है? इतिहास भूगोल इस चीज की coaching करती है. So, but anyways, so yeah, I took humanities with mathematics actually, but then I didn't study
Okay.
history because in our school there was a this choice between history or maths. Now, this is again stupid because if you give humanities,
Hmm.
ideally you should make history
And you're
compulsory.
taking off history from it, right?
Yeah, you could have
Exactly.
exempted, let's say, physical education and put maths in that place, or computer and maths में option दे देते, but stupid as it is actually. But yeah, that was the thing. So I did not take history, I took maths. But then I was always interested in history. So exposure तो पहले से ही था. But गलत side of history का था. I think that is a small
वो
input.
आज भी है। आई एम टेलिंग यू 2023 का 12th का स्टूडेंट हो, आज भी गलत एक्सपोजर मिल रहा है हमें,
Uh,
एटलीस्ट टेक्स्ट बुक से। एंड दैट टबू यू टॉक्ड अबाउट, दैट स्टिल प्रीटी रेलेवेंट। मतलब मैं नया नया 11th में आया था एंड मैं ऐसे जा रहा था तो एक अंकल मिले बिल्डिंग के, तो कहते बेटा आप अभी क्या कॉलेज में? मैं कहा नहीं अंकल मैं 11th में हूँ। कहते अच्छा तो 10th का रिजल्ट आ गया ना? मैं कहा हाँ आ गया। कितने आए? तब मेरे 93 रहे थे।
okay.
एंड आवर बैच वाज द वन जिसके दो टर्म्स में हुए थे, टर्म 1 एंड टर्म 2, ऐसे 40 मार्क्स एग्जाम हुए थे बिकॉज ऑफ कोविड एंड ऑल।
Mm-hmm.
तो मैं कहा मेरे 93 या 94 जितने भी बने थे, मैं कहते हैं वो अच्छा आपने स्ट्रीम कौन सी ली? मैं अंकल ह्यूमैनिटीज। उन्होंने बोला है अच्छा अच्छा कोई बात नहीं, कोई बात नहीं, कंसोल कर रहे थे कि कोई बात नहीं।
कोई बात नहीं.
मैं भी निकल गया, मैं कहा अब अंकल से क्या बहस करनी।
Anyways, this is the perception. अब ये ट्रेंड भी पुराना हो चुका है. आप कोई कहे ना तो बोल देना अब ये ट्रेंड पुराना हो चुका है ना.
अब तो फर्क भी नहीं पड़ता,
Stop it now.
अब जनरली फर्क नहीं पड़ता।
Yeah.
तो टॉकिंग अबाउट रॉन्ग एक्सपोजर टू हिस्ट्री, आपने 10th तक तो हिस्ट्री पढ़ी होगी राइट?
Yeah.
फिर अगर 11th 12th में करो तो हाउ वाज हिस्ट्री बैक देन? मतलब बिकॉज इफ आई टॉक अबाउट 11th एंड 12th राइट नाउ, 11th में वी हैव वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री व्हिच इज मेसोपोटामिया, रोमन एम्पायर एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा।
Mm-hmm.
12th में वी हैव इंडियन हिस्ट्री डिवाइडेड इनटू थ्री पार्ट्स, एंशिएंट, मिडिवल, मॉडर्न। मॉडर्न में वही प्री इंडिपेंडेंस, एंशिएंट में बहुत पुराना, महाभारत। महाभारत का भी वही पूरा उसका मेडल्ड अप वर्जन है। इट सेड कि महाभारत जो रिटन डॉक्यूमेंट है दैट इज 1000 years 1500 years old, दैट्स ऑल।
Okay.
एंड उसमें भी इतने सारे इटरेशंस है। एंड महाभारत को अपेरेंटली ये दिखाया गया कि महाभारत में बहुत सारे कास्ट डिविजन्स हैं, उसमें बहुत सारे सोसाइटल नॉर्म्स हैं जो कि बहुत रिजिड है। वही एकलव्य का एग्जांपल देखिए कि एकलव्य वाज एन आउटकास्ट, तो कैसे हमारे लाइक हिस्ट्री में बहुत ज्यादा कास्ट डिविजन होते थे एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा। वन एग्जांपल मेरी मैम ने बताया कि गांधारी जो थी दुर्योधन की मॉम, तो दुर्योधन एक बार उनके पास जाते हैं तो गांधारी उनसे कहती है, दिस इज जस्ट बिफोर द वॉर, कि अवॉइड द वॉर इफ पॉसिबल बिकॉज इट विल बी टोटल एनाइलेशन फॉर द कौरवास। तो दुर्योधन अपैरेंटली डजंट लिसन टू हर, व्हिच वी ऑल नो, ठीक है? तो मैम इज स्टेटिंग कि दिस शोज कैसे women in the ancient society their opinion and their viewpoint wasn't respected। मैंने कहा मैम अगर मैं आज की डेट में अपनी मम्मी की एक बात नहीं मानता हूँ क्योंकि आई एम ऑन अ डिफरेंट
So
tangent, that does not mean that
going by this logic, Ravan should have never taken revenge for his sister. Should not,
exactly।
right? Anyways, you should have said this to her.
मैंने बोला मैम आज की डेट में अगर मैं अपनी मम्मी की एक बात नहीं मानता जस्ट बिकॉज आई थिंक डिफरेंटली डज नॉट मीन कि मैं उनकी रिस्पेक्ट नहीं करता, बस
Does
ऑफिस
not
है
mean
जैसी
that
बट
women are oppressed in modern society
एग्जैक्टली।
necessarily. Yeah.
बट देन ठीक है, हिस्ट्री बुक्स एनसीईआरटी वी ऑल नो हाउ इट वर्क्स। तो आपका एक्सपोजर एंड आपका डीलिंग कैसा था टिल 10th एटलीस्ट वाया स्कूल के टेक्स्ट व्हेन इट कम्स टू हिस्ट्री?
Okay, so like when I was in class 10 and all, like information revolution was literally happening at the time. So social media was just introduced, digitalization of our lives was happening. Until then, frankly, textbook for us was the gospel truth. कि textbook में जो लिखा होता है, that can't be a lie at all. That was the perception, at least from the part of country I come from. And so yeah, so we had World War things, we had the freedom struggle, the whole caliphate movement. It was completely whitewashed. Like there was no even the slightest indication that there was kind of a an agreement between Gandhi and the a promise to establish the caliph. So that was the thing. So these things were completely whitewashed, and even our teachers were entirely unaware, given the education that they have been through. So हमारे time में तो it wasn't even a point that you're going to debate with the teacher. Neither were we so aware of all these facts. I think these things have started to change the goalpost and the narrative dramatically in the last 3 to 4 years, I think, when you have had very strong voices and a lot of people who are fact checking, and left historians are completely exposed now. New facts are coming up, and it is being rebutted with a lot of scholarship. वो एक book लिख रहे हैं, इधर से 10 book लिखी जा रही है, rebutting them fact wise, point by point. So I think, yeah, it's a very recent phenomena, so to speak. But then in my time, it was, as I said, textbooks were the gospel truth. So we were studying, like, a lot of things that we study are outdated, right? So that was a known fact. But then it is part of some national agenda and kind of a propaganda that वो ख्याल किसी के दिमाग में cross भी नहीं करता था. So surprisingly, this is not too old a thing. Like, I'm talking about hardly 2015-16. But then it was like this, actually. So we barely questioned the textbooks and all. So there wasn't any such uprising of a counter narrative. That wasn't there at all. So हमें पता ही नहीं था until like 2-3 years back. I didn't even know that a lot of things that I've studied is just BS. It's nonsense. So just like the Aryan theory, like Aryan invasion theory was propagated in our head like anything, and now even scientifically it has been disproven that there is no such thing of genetics and faltuka, nothing like that. So, but still you see, people still continue to wahi raag alap rahe, like we say.
Let's pick up a tangent from all the BS we were taught. Aryan invasion theory, for sure. जो theory stated कि Dravidians are the original Indians per se, and then Aryans बाहर से आए थे, they annihilated us.
Yeah.
And जो apparently उनके physical features बहुत अच्छे थे, वो यूरोप से आए थे. But now genetically उसको debunk करा जाए तो पहला सबसे बड़ा जो migration हुआ था, that was out of Africa. The second biggest one happened from our subcontinent.
Right.
हमारे subcontinent से बाहर गए थे.
And therefore,
And
Sanskrit
genetically-
and everything is found in the mostly these countries, I think, east of Europe, right? Like Latvia and Lithuania, a lot of these Baltic languages, I think, Baltic nations. So there you will find a lot of words seem to be very familiar with Sanskrit. So yeah, so that kind of proves the point that there was a migration of people from here to that part of the world, and therefore the language kind of went. So yeah, true.
Aryan invasion theory बहुत massively debunk हुआ था. My first exposure to this debunking was via Abhijit Chawla, and I was blown. Genetically भी proven है कि यहाँ से सबसे बड़ा migration हुआ था. अगला tangent उठाया तो this is my favorite arena, which is pre-independence history, जो बहुत controversial बन जाती है, but then I have extreme fun talking about it. Even school में भी अब ये narrative बन गया है कि अगर स्पर्श है, स्पर्श तो गांधी के अगेंस्ट भी बोलेगा. There have been people coming up to me and talking, बैठेंगे आराम से 5 मिनट, स्पर्श तो गांधी के इतना अगेंस्ट क्यों है, एंड देन फिर मैं पूरी बुक खोल देता हूँ, भाई ये एंड टॉकिंग अबाउट इट. फिर सबसे पहले उनका पॉइंट उठता है, भाई तुम्हारा सोर्स क्या है. अब जब मोहनदास गांधी ने खुद ही अपने बुक में लिखा हुआ है कि आई हैव बीन अ लॉयल सर्वेंट टू द ब्रिटिश, तो उससे बड़ा सोर्स तुम्हें क्या चाहिए. बट देन वही काफी लोग तो हो गए हैं, मतलब ठीक है, they accepted the fact that maybe Gandhi isn't someone to be deified, but then still there are elements. तो आपका कोई ऐसा एक्सपोजर था, मतलब आपका कोई ऐसा इंसिडेंट रहा हो कि controversial bit of history where you stood your point and others have hovered around you?
For Gandhi, like, of course, all of us treat Gandhi as Mahatma, and he has a lot of things to his credit. Especially, like, he's been eulogized for being the national figure, kind of bringing everything together. So, उस point में I really, really admired him. That he kind of became a central force. Like, he was the one जिसकी बात सब सुनते थे, like all sides. So okay, so he was the unifying factor, undoubtedly. But I entered into this cognitive dissonance. So there's a psychological term, cognitive dissonance, when basically you have to behave against your perception or your beliefs and opinions, basically. So that's cognitive dissonance. So that started to happen with me because I believed, okay, Gandhi is a Mahatma, Gandhi is and this and that. And when I started to hear Gandhi's own thoughts about blacks, about so right, so there is open source information, anybody can Google and find that Gandhi's opinions about Hitler, and the whole Nazi thing. So वहां पे I was like, नहीं ये नहीं हो सकता. So that Indian daily soap wala shock. So that is what I kind of got when I started to get exposed to Gandhi's thought about blacks. So the things which Gandhi said about the blacks, आज के time पे if you say those things, you would be classified as literally a supremacist, a bigot, racist, सब कुछ. And if you like go to the West and say those things that Gandhi said about these races, you could be jailed for sure, because of anti-racism laws and all. So that was my kind of inflection point that, okay, maybe we should rethink about eulogizing Gandhi and giving him the shray about each and everything that happened. And then the whole thing about Nazi thing, about Jews, and then about Hindus also, like famous quote of Gandhi that if Muslims want to kill us all, we should accept that, and usher in a new world, ... So that this is just paraphrasing, not an actual quote. But then, yeah, on similar lines. So when I got exposed to these things, and then I always knew that in his personal life, Gandhi wasn't a great husband, right? So I still get that, because I think this is a very, I don't know whether I should say this, but then like a lot of great men whom I have studied, whom I've come to know, somehow their personal lives were completely dismantled. Their personal lives weren't as great. So they were good in some aspects and not so great in other aspects, right? For example, the founding fathers of America, I think 3 out of 5 of them were slave owners, right? Now, anybody might want to think that, oh, should we really admire them that much, given that they were slave owners? So, yeah, so on those lines, I was like, okay, maybe I can discount them for not being so good in his personal life. But then when I start knowing these things about Gandhi, and then also the whole thing post independence, that he was like, we have promised to give Pakistan certain crores rupees, we should just give it because that's our tongue, we have promised that. And by that time it was proven that Pakistan was kind of using that money to fund terrorism and fund extremism in Kashmir. So yeah, so after these things, so these are against common logic actually. Not even it's not even that only a patriot would be against these kind of notions, but even a common logical human being would say something is not okay here. So these revelations were my inflection point, as I said, when my thoughts started to change about the Mahatma. Yeah.
Anyone who's like in his basic sane position, I
Yeah.
don't think would deify Gandhi as we are ought to do. And I guess मेरे ख्याल से आनंद रंगनाथन के पॉडकास्ट पे शायद उन्होंने बोला था with those cast that if you are a true patriot, if you love Bharat, then you cannot love the Mahatma per se. Because for the audience, if you do not know about what we were talking about, his stanzas about Jews, what he talked about Jews, what he talked about Hindus, about the blacks, about the Hindus, as Shreyash already mentioned, this was during the Khilafat movement, if I'm not wrong, the Mopla rebellion when it took place.
Yeah, which is not even spoken about. Like people are,
1920. And it's painted as a rebellion per se, कि peasants rebelled against their landowners.
Yeah, see.
So actually हुआ क्या था, if we can give a bit of context to the audience, 1921 during the Khilafat movement, people, shall we name out the community? We would be fine to do that, but what actual history is like, Khilafat movement was started in the name of Islam, wherein the Ottoman Empire lost to Europe.
Yeah.
Am I going to
Established the Caliph in Turkey, if I'm
and
not
the Khilafat,
yeah.
And the Caliphate was yes, and the Caliphate was dismantled. तो यहाँ पे केरला में मोपला region में Muslims started attacking Hindus because, of course, political boundaries do not matter. The Ummah matters in the bigger term.
Yeah, but then
Muslim brethren
actually, yeah, there's a important point here that when that promise seems like started to seem that it won't be fulfilled, then the rebellion started. So until that time, it was kind of an agreement that, okay, we would work with Gandhi, we would work to establish the caliph over there, and snatch the powers from the hands of the British. So until there was hope that that would be established, that would happen. There was coordination and collaboration. But once the hope started to, collapse, that that's not going to happen, then this kind of a rebellion started. And then there was a huge, I would term it genocide, that happened in Mopla. So yeah, so that was the whole thing. And surprisingly, when we talk about wrong history and left historians, just a comparative analysis, there have been so many historical wrongs around the world. There has been the Auschwitz concentration camp, there have been millions of Jews were killed. There have been so many others, right? The Native Americans. But then something which is starkly underscored, something which has not been given its, due condolences even, is the genocide of Hindus, So I think it is American historian Will Durant, if I'm not wrong. He said that Islamic invasion of India is one of the biggest genocides in human history, not even Indian history, human history. The population of the subcontinent fell by a certain percentage. So leave alone the vandalization of property and temples and all of that. That's still material wealth. But then the life that was lost was so much that you had the Skull Tower by Akbar the Great, right, and so many others. So yeah, so it is not the, let's say, Indic wing historians who are saying that. It's a lot of Westerners, the historians over there are saying that the genocide of Hindus, and it was like 8, 9, several times over. Like every invasion happened was a genocide. So, and it is
Somnath temple itself was
about.
attacked 16 or 17 times. 17 if I'm not wrong. The Somnath temple in Gujarat by Mahmud Ghazni was attacked 16 to 17 times.
I'm not sure about the number, but yeah, I mean, it was only, I think, Alia Bai who rebuilt the Somnath temple. It was Ahilya Bai Holkar who rebuilt the Somnath temple, yeah, and also the Kashi. So this is the thing. So I think this is sad. You cannot, let's say, so we have so many genocide deniers. So we just think about Kashmiri Pandits when we think about genocide deniers. But then, I'm sorry, but then even like during the Aurangzeb's era and during other, let's say, Babur or all these Islamic invaders, there are genocide deniers. People are like, no, Aurangzeb was a reformist. He was kind of reforming the temples by, because temples were kind of linked to having some sort of unethical practices with women and all of that. And so, there are still people who say that Aurangzeb was a reformist. So we still have genocide design. You can't do this with regards to the Jewish genocide. There are laws. You try doing this with some other prosecuted community, let's say Native Americans or indigenous community of Australia, you would immediately be, I'm against canceling, but then you'll be called out, so to speak. But then here you can very easily get away, Forget about law, you will.
And the fact that despite all of
Yeah.
this, we are known to be the rigid ones and we are known to be the intolerant ones in the society, in the world in general.
Yeah, which is sad.
So, so back to the Mopla rebellion, the rebellion happened, which is nowadays taught to us in the form of that peasants rebelled against their landowners because of low wages, in fact, unpaid labor work, etc., etc. But then it was a proper anti-Hindu genocide, and the Mahatma at that time claimed that if our Muslim brethren were coming to kill us, we should lay out our lives to usher in a new world of peace.
Yeah.
As it is at YouTube.
There are
Paraphrasing
few more words in
the
between,
Mahatma roughly,
it's on
and
the
that's
same.
what he said.
Yeah.
Right. So a person who is being treated as a Mahatma is blatantly calling out for a whole community to go towards their genocide. And we apparently call him as the father of our nation.
Yeah. So, and
probably the same thing happened with the Jews as well.
What do you mean? Sorry.
Talking about Mahatma.
Yeah, his
Gandhi gave out some
sentiments,
similar statements when it came to
his thoughts about Hitler and the whole thing. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, these things kind of made me to come to a conclusion that maybe we should rethink before calling him a Mahatma. And I certainly don't consider him as Mahatma, just another figure during our freedom movement. I would just leave at that.
Moving on to a bit forward from 1920s, 46, when the Indian Royal Naval Mutiny happened.
Yeah.
Royal Indian Naval Mutiny happened. आई एम स्टडिंग हिस्ट्री, मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ, 1.5-2 पैराग्राफ में द होल एपिसोड इज समड अप एज
So,
इफ इट वाज जस्ट अनदर इवेंट. उसकी कोई सिग्निफिकेंस नहीं है. व्हेन इन रियलिटी इट वाज प्रोबेबली वन ऑफ दोस पॉइंट्स जिसने फास्टन अप किया था हमारे इंडिपेंडेंस को. सो I'll let you have your view on it, or let you explain it to the audience as in rough
I
terms
can
कि हुआ क्या
explain
था
it.
exactly.
I can explain it from a Western academic point of view, actually. So there's a huge narrative which says that British left India because of imperial exhaustion. So for those of you who don't know imperial exhaustion, imperialism. Imperialism basically means making colonies, capturing lands and territories. And exhaustion simply means fatigue, right? So there is a whole narrative which says that this is just imperial exhaustion. There was Second World War, so British soldiers were already tired with that. And then handling these colonies was sort of white man's burden. So the British got exhausted, and so therefore this was a result of imperial exhaustion, that a change in heart happened and they simply left the country. This is, mota, it is on this line. And same, by the way, same explanation by a lot of credible people is given for the American troops leaving Afghanistan, before Taliban capturing Afghanistan. A lot of people said that, this is imperial exhaustion of America, and America is dragging out its troops, and it's just, I don't know, then why did they leave their fully armed, high-tech weapons behind? Right. So again, so this is kind of a very Western perspective about how British kind of left India, which was imperial exhaustion according to them. And in our textbooks, it is not even this mutiny, it is accredited to Quit India movement, that it was the Quit India movement. And here,
even up till 10th, I hadn't read about this in textbooks. At least मैंने बाहर से हाँ सुना था इस mutiny के बारे में, but then major event was to 42 के बाद सीधा 47 में. हाँ.
Yeah. So it's just Quit India movement, and then wow, all of a sudden we got the independence. So here I would like to, I think I would borrow few things that I learned from Dr. Sampath actually and his work. So the 1946 mutiny, just to disprove the whole Quit India movement, Clement Attlee, who was I think British Prime Minister, I'm not sure. So Clement Attlee, he came to 5-6 years after we got independence. He came to West Bengal, and there he encountered Chakrabarti, I guess. He was the governor of Bengal, So Justice Chakrabarti. So Justice Chakrabarti asked Clement Attlee that, what do you think about this whole mutiny, and we are quite surprised that how all of a sudden we weren't expecting freedom this early. So how you British left India so early and so quickly, you just packed your bags, quickly, and you just left, right, without any major happening. So was it because of Quit India movement? Would you is it because of the impact that Quit India movement had? And Clement Attlee, to borrow his words, he just said that the impact of Quit India movement was minimal, so it was minimal completely, almost nowhere to be found. And the actual reason was the heroics of the insurrection, I would use the word, of the Indian soldiers within the British Army. So the British Army in India had about 2.5 million soldiers, and the British in them were hardly 10,000, and the rest were all Indian origin. Okay, so these revolutionaries, so if you read Sanjeev Sanyal's Revolutionaries, or even if you read the works of Dr. Sampath, so they have written extensively with evidence that how these revolutionaries, who are not very much talked about, right? So their whole idea was to bring these Indian soldiers within the British Army to the side of the revolutionaries, to the side of the freedom movement, the nationalists, whom we call. Right. So make them from loyalists to nationalists, change of their heart. And that kind of started to happen during 1946. And that is the whole mutiny incident that we famously talk about. So it was, all these sailors, that's why we call the naval mutiny. So all these sailors, they started to think that, yeah, we should actually be on the side of the nationalists, and literally wipe these guys out. So the whole plan of the revolutionaries was that even 10% of these soldiers, if their heart changes, so the British Raj will not be able to survive, because the entire edifice, the foundation of them was the army. That's how they controlled the Indian population. So this was the whole thing. So it is, in the words of Clement Attlee, that it is because of the efforts of Subhash Chandra Bose and his army that literally scared the British. And yes, of course, Second World War was there, in which also huge number of Indian soldiers fought from the British side, whom we don't speak about. So yeah, so see, this is the whole thing.
So we've talked about the Royal Naval Mutiny as well. जब हम गांधी के बारे में बात कर रहे थे, you might have seen me fiddling around. मैं कुछ ढूंढ रहा था, and what I was doing was कि मैंने एक book में actually sources लिखे हुए थे, just to debunk those जो मेरे against में जाते थे, जब भी मैं गांधी के बारे में बात करता था. इसलिए you might have seen a bag in my hand in between, और मैं पीछे भी ढूंढ रहा था. मैंने एक book में सारा लिखा हुआ था. I'll just sum that up once so that ये वाला पत्ता हमारा clear है before we are treated as bigots and कि हम baseless claims बना रहे हैं. My experiments with truth जो गांधी जी ने खुद ही लिखी थी.
Very good. Yeah.
Page number 243 says, suffice it to say that my loyalty to the British rule drove me to participation with the British in that war, wherein he is referring to the Boer War. I felt that if I demanded rights as a British citizen, it was also my duty as such to participate in the defense of the British Empire.
Wow. And this is
This
my
is what
experiments
I
with
found
truth.
with truth. Peज नंबर 243 आप बकायदा जाके देख लो, आप सभी को ऑडियंस को मिल जाएगा.
But then one thing we must congratulate Gandhi for his truthfulness. Sure.
He is too much of an open book.
Good. It's a good thing.
Young India was probably his publishing weekly या monthly आता था, wherein he wrote letters to open letters.
Yeah.
To every Englishman in India जो letter है, which is dated 27th of October 1920. He says, I've put my life in peril 4 times for the sake of the empire. And he's referring to the Boer War, the Zulu Revolt, the commencement of the late war, wherein again he was working as in the ambulance corps, and his promise to Lord Chelmsford in the war conference in Delhi. ये 4 चीजों को वो reference कर रहा है, where he says कि I've put my life in peril 4 times for the sake of the empire. And then apparently he is the father of our nation. So that is where we end the Gandhi and the pre-independence history वाला topic. Moving on, आजकल क्या चल रहा है? Canada is probably in a very confused state right now, post G20. उनका एयरप्लेन काम नहीं कर रहा था, उनका जो बैकअप आया वो भी काम नहीं कर रहा था. And then they got into controversy with the Khalistani thing. So we have actually written about this, the whole
Yeah,
two-day show.
I've written a column that was published in the Viyug. The Viyug is a independent think tank of India and a publishing media, you can say. So yeah, and actually it was very interesting because like I have been following Trudeau because like I study international relations, so my one aspect of my study is to study these leaders, be it Trump or Biden or this guy Justin Trudeau. So just to borrow a line from one of Samir Saran's interview, so in that the interviewer said, there is truth, then there is lie, and then there is Trudeau. So this is the right metaphor, frankly speaking, for this guy, because he is a classic failure at global perception. Believe me, he is a textbook example of what not to do as a politician.
What to do.
Right. So being in his young years, there's a very famous controversy where he was, I think he put something on his face like black color or something, I don't know. Something happened. So since then, so at that time people were like, oh, this is very puerile, this is very juvenile, maybe he'll mature. So you can call him the Raga of Canada quite safely. You can make this comparison. And then he is been into trouble for not just this trip. I think both the trips that he has made to India have been total disaster, like literally total disasters. The trip that he made in 2018, that was, he got so red-faced. It was so embarrassing that like the entire media of Canada, the entire opposition, and even he himself had to come and say, I think he said that in one of the important gatherings in Canada, that he was literally embarrassed, and he wants to kind of forget the whole chapter. So be his peculiar dance moves, be him overdressing, like he overdressed even for an Indian, literally he was so overdressed. You just type Trudeau's India visit 2018 and you'll get all these details, and he literally went over the board. I mean, what not to say, main kya chhod दूं? And then he kind of ended up announcing a wrong investment figure. So there was some investment that was made and he announced a wrong figure, that India is investing certain $1 billion in Canada and Canada is doing so. It was actually opposite.
426 रुपए में रफाल खरीदा ऐसा किसी ने बोला था इसके लिए.
Yeah, right. So he was misquoting the figures, and then one of the, like, ये सब तो चलो हंसी मजाक की बातें हो गई, but then like one of the serious things that went wrong, for which he was condemned across the board, was he invited an assassination convict to his reception. So he did a reception in India in which he invited a convict, a criminal who tried to assassinate an Indian official in Vancouver. And he was a convict, not even alleged, he was a convict, right? So, and then that kind of left him completely embarrassed. And at that time also, he put the blame on others, his prime minister's office were like, we didn't know about this, we weren't informed about this, and there are certain officials who sent the invite mistakenly and all of that, blah, blah, blah. So even that trip of his was complete.
पीएम ऑफिस में इतने बड़े मैसअप थोड़ी होते हैं. आप अगर पीएम ऑफिस से किसी को बुला रहे हो तो
आप इससे बड़े अभी मैसअप सुनोगे. That was not, that was वो तो था ही. This time what happened in the recent incident, Vladimir Zelensky was in Canada a couple of months back, I guess. He was in Canada, and just to stand with, in solidarity with the Ukrainian war and the conflict that is happening. So in that, Trudeau's officials somehow ended up inviting a guest of honor who was a Nazi war veteran.
अच्छा हाँ, right.
Right, so that Nazi war veteran somehow was invited as the guest of honor in the Canadian Hall of Commons, right? So he kind of fought in the World War, but then from the wrong side. So from the side of Nazis. So he was a Nazi war veteran, right? And if that were not enough, entire house gave that guy a standing ovation, including Trudeau and Vladimir Zelensky. And the Speaker of the House called that guy a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and all of that. So that was, I think, one of the most embarrassing things that has happened to Trudeau. And then, yeah, that's what I'm saying, no, what to leave, actually. Because
but then why is it इतनी अच्छी खासी established democracy है, and then इतने बड़े मैसेज हो रहे हैं, और apparently Canada, for the lack of a better word, is getting into the faces of others. कि अपने आप को establish करने, wannabe types का establish करने की कोशिश कर रही है, but then they're being played around with. चल क्या रहा है उनकी politics में actually? उनके relations मतलब उनके policies किस चीज पे based है?
Okay, there are a lot of things to decode actually. First is the Canadian political system itself. So Canadian political system is a classic example, and in fact, I've written this in my column also, that it's a great case study on how a minority within the minority can hijack the national narrative. Now, the Sikhs of Indian origin in Canada are like a micro minority in Canada, right? But then if you see, most of the issues concerning, the Sikhs are the national narrative. Yeah, just like the Khalistan thing, it's national agenda sometimes, right? So it's a very classic example of how a minority within the minority can kind of hijack the entire narrative. So, and then you have Jagmeet Singh. So Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau is into power because of support of this Khalistani leader, Jagmeet Singh. So now you can see the link why Justin Trudeau is kind of, so pampering and emboldening towards Khalistani separatist movement, right? So this is the reason basically because of it is political expediency, you can say, of Trudeau and his party. And then other things that are happening is Trudeau's party is kind of tolerating left-wing extremism within Canada. A lot of things are happening on that side. Canada is finding itself in all-time high housing crisis. There's a lot of inflation. So there's a lot of discontent among normal people. And also I was discussing with my professor a couple of days back. He's a Canadian, by the way. So when I sent him this article, we had a lot of discussions to and fro because he kind of supports the Liberal Party, but then he doesn't like the leadership of Justin Trudeau. So we were having a lot of these discussions, and he was telling me that, surprisingly, since his childhood, he hasn't seen such things happening in Canada, but now people are coming out with cars and posters of fuck Trudeau and all of that, because to express their discontent. So he was saying that, this is kind of Americanization of Canadian politics, which is a very, funny term to use in in my side of the world. So yeah, because like these things are very typical of America, such explicit hatred towards leaders and protests and all of that. So I think you can attribute most of this to just the leadership of Justin Trudeau. So is it too much to ask of a leader and his prime minister's office to at least check the background of his guests, like whom are you inviting as a guest of honor? So yeah, and so the whole opposition led by Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, they are kind of they kind of like literally called Trudeau out for this mistake. And then there is a Center for Holocaust Studies. I'm forgetting the name actually. Let me refer to my article quickly. Yeah, Friends of Simon Wiesenthal, so this is a Center for Holocaust Studies. They also issued statements against him for inviting this Nazi war veteran, Jarlos Hunka. So these are the things. So you can attribute it mostly to Justin Trudeau's leadership because he's a Nepo product to start with. Like his father was a prime minister, and during his father's time, the Kanishka bombing happened, remember? So even his father was very soft-hearted or not very explicitly coming down upon the militants and the terrorists. So the Kanishka bombing, where like literally 320 people died on board, like the Air India flight got bombed midair in Canadian airspace, that happened during his father's regime. So since then, it's a very long history. So when people debate in modern times, they lack historical context completely. Completely. In fact, I was surprised, like there are intellectual people who are telling me that, the guy who got killed, Nijjar, he was just the head of an organization which had a terrorist background. So would you call this guy also a terrorist? So what that is, just to explain that in simple languages, कि अगर किसी organization का extremist past रहा है, या terrorist past रहा है decades ago, अगर अब कोई बंदा उस organization को head कर रहा है, तो क्या उसको terrorist कहना सही है? Now going by that logic, because these people say क्योंकि इस बंदे ने तो कोई crime नहीं किया, इस बंदे ने तो कोई extremism तो फैलाया verbally, but physically कुछ ऐसा नहीं किया. So going by this logic, I just want to ask these people, would you then tolerate neo-Nazis? A lot of neo-Nazis don't have blood on their hands, right? But then when someone says that I ascribe to this organization, every organization has an ideology to start with. Without an ideology, there can be no organization or no community, so to speak. So if someone says that I belong to this, I identify with this organization, means that that person identifies with the edifice or the foundation of that organization, which is that ideology. Now that can be separatism, that can be white supremacism, that can be racism, that can be anti-Semitism, whatever. So you cannot, it's like saying you are convicting the fundamentals, but you're sparing the fundamentalists. Usually उल्टा होता है,
आनंद
spare the fundamentals and convict the fundamentalists, but यहाँ पे it's the other way around. So it's very interesting actually. Yeah, and such people completely lack all types of historical context and information. It's pure rhetorics.
So we've talked about history, we've talked about Canada in the modern times, we've talked pretty much
Just
as always
drop
we
the
do.
link of my article in the
So we'll do that, we'll do that,
description,
for sure.
because I've missed a lot of things. I wrote it months back, but then yeah, people should read it actually.
Sure, we'll do that. तो let's talk about थोड़ा सा बैक स्टेप लेते हैं. हिस्ट्री की हम बात कर रहे थे कैसे वी आर टॉट मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री एंड ऑल, बट देन सॉल्यूशंस 2023 में मॉडर्न जनरेशन, हाउ कैन वी वर्क टुवर्ड्स A, getting to know about the real history, B, articulating it well enough कि it does not seem कि हम बस argument के basis पे वो सब state कर रहे हैं, but then to actually overhaul the system. तो ये what is your take on this?
Yeah. The first thing that I would say is that थोड़ा सा tone down हो, थोड़ा सा लोगों को ठंडा होने की जरूरत है on all sides. This is very important because things are getting heated up a lot unnecessarily. Like you won't believe personal relationships spoil ho rahi hai just because people are at different poles on a political spectrum. I wouldn't even call it poles. It's literally a spectrum, right? I might be at this side. I might agree to some extent with this side, but not extremely on that side, or not extremely on the other side. So I can be somewhere in the center, somewhere towards the right, somewhere towards the left, might not be at extreme ends. So I think people need to tone down first of all, because nobody knows nothing. Literally, people don't know a damn thing about anything. So people should literally stop being experts about anything and literally be humble and study more. That is the point, because we are not at wars in present times, thankfully, except a few parts of the world. So yeah, you don't need to be that aggressive and बहुत ज़्यादा एकदम मोर्चा लेके every side. I'm talking about all sides, right, left, center, whatever, because it's very important, because if you become too presumptuous, that will corrupt your understanding. So you should be black and white, but then at the same time, you should not be a militant with your ideology that this is the final truth, or this is it, right? So I think that is the first thing. And based on my conversations, because I engage in these things a lot with university students, with people, friends back in India and all, people hugely lack factual information about anything. Forget about politics, even religion pe aap baat karo, they don't know a damn thing. You talk about anything, people don't know a damn thing. And I'm going to get a lot of hate things on this, but then people literally, including myself, people don't know a damn thing about anything. So try to first grasp information, don't be mum, don't just think कि मेरे को अपना opinion अपने तक ही रखना चाहिए, it doesn't matter. I think it matters, right? If you have something meaningful to say. So yeah, so first thing is like just tone down yourself, थोड़े से ठंडे हो जाओ, don't be aggressive, and then start seeking sources from where you can get authentic knowledge and read all sides. This is very important. Don't be in an echo chamber. Don't be in an echo chamber at all. It's if you will operate like that, your real life, believe me, will also become like social media, where if you like Panch Gulzar ke Sher, all your reels feed will get filled with those shares. If you like travel videos, your entire feed will get filled. Your explore section will fill like that. If you're a bodybuilder, you'll see all that. So real life is not social media. So read all sides. You have a choice to read everything. And don't be just dependent on WhatsApp University, social media. Don't treat social media as a credible source at all, because it's highly doctored and you know the algorithms. So seek real sources, read a lot of scholarship, and read all sides. Read, if you're reading Jai Sai Deepak, also read Shashi Tharoor, right? Shashi Tharoor's book, Infamous Empire, is amazing. You must read it, right? So read all these sides so that then you can form an opinion, and then you can very logically rebut and counter argue on certain notions, right? So I think that is very important. I know people usually think that this is not relevant. मेरे को अपना engineering IT पे ध्यान देना है. I should rather focus on my weekends. What do I have to do about this? Okay, be my guest. But then at the same time, later on, don't complain when at large people are literally who are operating agendas and who are literally controlling the narratives, and then suddenly you see changes in the society, and then you're like, this is getting too much. This you never did anything about it, right? जब तुम्हें करना चाहिए था, then you were like, oh, I would rather enjoy my weekends than getting into all this shit. So now you have to face the consequences, right? That's like, for example, artists. I mean, I'm a huge, I'm also a free speech absolutist. Frankly speaking, I think everything should be criticized, including religion. The religion should be criticized heavily. In fact, religion should be something which should be criticized the most, very frankly speaking, because of their reach.
Spot on.
Because of their reach, what a celebrity or a prime minister says might not reach as many people as a spiritual teacher or a religious teacher would say, or a preacher, whatever, right? So that's the reason I feel religion should be heavily criticized, but then that criticism should be well informed. That's like saying कि आप किसी thesis का anti-thema तब बना पाते हो when you actually read that theory completely, right? That's how you criticize theories. You read the theories, you get its findings, and then you come to the critiques part that, okay, the theory postulates this, ABC, but then it fails to explain X, Y, Z, yeah, whatever, right? Or is not time specific, yeah, whatever. That's how you criticize theories. So I think with any other thing on planet, it should be like this. So you should know what you're talking about. So if you're criticizing something, a person, an ideology, a religion, you should be well informed. So I think knowledge is the way out. I think that is the bottom line over here. So if people are following knowledge from all sides and not be too rigid, I think I think I have great hopes with our society now. There's an uprising, there is an Indic renaissance. I think a lot of famous people on the Indic side say this, that there's an Indic renaissance, and there would be frustration from people whose narratives are now getting broken. So we should let them at least cry, right? I mean, itna to unka hak hai that they would get frustrated, they would shout, they would howl, they would cancel you. It's okay. I mean, itna to unka hak hai, right? As long as it is not physical, like it used to happen in olden times, right? Like you say something against the establishment and you're dead. That's how criticism and uprising was handled. At least they just abuse us on social media, which is okay. I mean, I have no problem with that. So
I love the way you handle stuff.
and
इतने
then
calmly आपने बोला, please let them cry.
yeah, I mean, let them cry. It's okay. I mean, अब ये हक तो नहीं छीन सकते ना किसी से. ये तो नहीं कह सकते कि भाई तुम्हारा फाउंडेशन ही हटा देंगे फिर तुम रो भी मत. You should not even try and complain.
All right. So thank you once again
Thank you very much.
for gracing podcast with SN. It's always fun talking to you. हम एक दूसरे के चैनल पे बहुत बार आ चुके हैं, but then I have never felt personally कि हमने सिर्फ एपिसोड शूट करें just for the sake of shooting it, क्योंकि हमेशा दोनों साइड्स को कुछ ना कुछ नया मिलता है.
Yeah.
And as always, it's been fun talking to you. कितना 1 घंटा हो ही गया होगा आराम से इस बार भी.
Thank you.
I'll have a tough time editing, but I'll have a fun time editing as well.
Yeah.
So I'll do that. And that's all. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Sparsh.
And we'll meet.
All the luck. Namaste.